which, although they're not many, they're more Hanafi materials, and Hanafi's rule, right? Hanafi's rule, and everywhere you go, the Hanafis, they're like everywhere, and it's kind of hard to compete. The Shafi'is, they're trying to catch up to Hanafis, but it's going to be quite difficult to catch up with the Hanafis. And the Malikis were still struggling, so alhamdulillah, as was stated earlier, I've been doing some online classes, try to give some people an opportunity to learn some more fiqh from the Maliki school. But at any rate, in time that can be hopefully remedied. There are different schools in the Maliki school itself. There are different schools. There you have the school of Medina, there's the school of Egypt, there's the school of Iraq, and there's the North African school, or the Andalusian school, which is Al-Maghrib, which includes, so it's North Africa and Andalus, Spain, Muslim Spain. These are historic schools. They don't necessarily still exist today, but these are schools, or these are parts of the Muslim Empire that had different scholars who had contributed, or they called the mujtahids of the school, had contributed to. And at times they would differ with one another in terms of their claims of what is the standard opinion in the Maliki school. So there were those differences that did exist. So for instance, some scholars have stated that sometimes when you find the mujtahids, they're differing with one another. Then the way that you determine which particular opinions are stronger is according to this particular example. So, for instance, Ibn Rushd. Ibn Rushd is one of the major mujtahids of the Maliki school. So Ibn Rushd sometimes, who is Andalusian, he sometimes may be in conflict with Abdul Wahhab al-Baghdadi, who is one of the Iraqi mujtahid scholars. And also at times he may differ with Imam al-Maziri, which is one of the Egyptian scholars. So these three scholars, there's really no way necessarily to distinguish between them, except that they're typically taken to be on the same level, but when they are at differences with one another. So Ibn Rushd against Abdul Wahhab al-Baghdadi, Ibn Rushd is stronger. See, you say, well, Ibn Rushd, we take his view. His claim of this is what madhab is, we take Ibn Rushd's claim. If Abdul Wahhab Baghdadi is against Imam al-Maziri, Abdul Wahhab Baghdadi is stronger. If any of those three are in conflict with one of the other Maliki mujtahideen, then their view is given precedence to the others. So, for instance, Ibn Yunus, one of the Egyptian scholars, he may conflict with one another. Then Ibn Yunus, his statement against Ibn Yunus, against Ibn Rushd or the other two means nothing. Imam Lakhmi, if he is in conflict with Ibn Yunus, then Imam Lakhmi, his view means nothing compared to Ibn Yunus. Then the Egyptians in general, if they differ with, if they have claims, then in terms of the hierarchy, in terms of the mujtahideen, if we find that the mujtahids of the Egyptian school are in conflict with the mujtahideen of the Medini school, the school of Medina, then those in the Egyptian school are considered to be stronger than those in the school of Medina. Even though Imam Malik is from Medina, that was his method, this method of Medina. But the Egyptian scholars historically have established themselves as having the greatest authority in the madhab itself. So, for instance, if we go back to Ibn al-Qasim, from whom Imam Sahnoud ibn Sa'id took the information about al-Mudawwana, which is considered to be the main source of the Maliki school. They were Egyptians, and they took this information direct from Imam Malik, and so they codified in the madhab. So the Medinites come only second, and then after the Medinites are the Maghariba, those of North Africa and Andalus, and then the Iraqis are last. So they're at the bottom. So if the Iraqis are in conflict with the people of the Maghrib or Morocco, then Moroccans are stronger. So yes.
I'm just wondering, I understand that, there may be, like, people have specific types of knowledge, and so you would give some extra weight, but wouldn't one want to actually examine the question and see who makes more sense as opposed to, like, where they're from necessarily?
Yeah, what this is not talking about any individual opinion regardless. What this is talking about, what this particular, I guess you would say this, What's the word? Hierarchy. I guess you say the hierarchy is trying to establish is what particular claims of standard views in the school itself are giving greater credence. You see.
And the follow-up question is, where does the Palestinian part of this fit in?
Yeah, well, there's no Palestinian school, so not in the Maliki school. So there may be Palestinian Malikis, but likely they're following the Iraqis or maybe the Medinians or it's just right. So it all depends on who you want to include yourself amongst. If you include yourself amongst the Egyptians are considered to be so pretty close to Egypt, right? Yeah, so that's just a brief overview of the school. I wanted to give you that introduction to it, and so that you can just get a basic idea of things. But understanding that within the Maliki school, that there are certain discrepancies between preference of different opinions. So sometimes you might, for instance, find a Maliki who prays like this, and then you say, well, don't Maliki supposed to pray like that? Say, well, he takes the opinion of a different school, you see. Of that particular view, and this means he's not a Maliki because he prays like this, or someone may do 2 salams as opposed to 1, and so you follow me that these are issues related to the region where people study, but today that you still don't find necessarily the same dynamic of Egyptians, Medinians, Moroccans, or Andalusians, and then Iraqis. You don't find the same distinctions. So today is more so you just have to look at what people are saying, because there's no such thing a lot of time when new issues come up to say, the Maliki school says this. Where's a brand new issue? How do you know? And it's just like, well, if you apply the principles and say, well, that's one fatwa, another Maliki scholar may give a different fatwa on that issue. So it's kind of hard to establish what is standard in the school in the time that we're living in, and so. But you do find that probably the most tenacious regarding the traditional or classical opinions in the school, and those who are probably the most rigid, the most conservative, put it that way, are certain groups that, like in Mauritania, such as those from Sheikh Murabit al-Hajj's village, who are the most rigid and conservative Malikis. Generally speaking, some of the people that Sheikh Hamza spoke, he had studied with himself. I studied in Morocco, and Morocco is not as conservative in terms of a lot of the fiqh, and I would say that Morocco is a bit more conservative than the Egyptians. The Egyptian Malikis today of Egypt are more liberal. Or less conservative than even the Moroccans. That is not to imply that they have abandoned the school, but it's just that they have done new ijtihadat on certain issues that, although in the Maliki school and the popular views of the Maliki school were deemed to be things which may have been inappropriate or undesirable, that they've tried to reconcile things. So an example of that is, in the Maliki school, it's considered to be disliked for people to do congregational Quranic recitation, to recite the Quran in congregation in unison. In Morocco, that's like regular practice. Every single masjid you go to, after Fajr, everybody reciting Hafiz Juz in unison. After Maghrib, they're doing the same thing. Some masjids include Asr, after Asr, so Fajr, after Asr, after Maghrib, they do it. They get together up around the minbar, around the mihrab, and people recite in unison, and afterwards they do dua, and then they leave. So it's a regular practice in Morocco. They've done it, they had to justify that.